OK, at 6:37, let's move on and take a look at the front pages of the newspapers this morning.
And after its victory in the Rutherglen by-election, the Eye reports of Labour's plan to solve the UK's housing crisis by building new towns and taxing developers.
And the new homes plan also on the front page there of The Guardian.
Labour policies also make the top story in The Times, with the Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting saying that the NHS must modernise or die.
And this is one you like, don't you? Menopause madness. It's the headline on the front page of the Mail, reporting quite seriously that dozens of public bodies and universities have what is called male menopause policies.
Yeah, wait till they hear about the man flu. And the death of the wife of former Manchester United football manager Sir Alex Ferguson is a lead story in The Star.
So there's lots to talk about. Joining us to go through some of those headlines, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and his wife, former Conservative... I can't believe I said that. and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall.
You could have said his former wife. That'd have been worse.
They happen to be married. Well, that's true, yes. OK, look, Nigel, let's start with you then. And in The Guardian, Keir Starmer sort of talking about his new homes pledge.
Yes, this is this is a big week for Labour coming up. So the Labour conference begins in Liverpool tomorrow. Angela Rayner will kick it off with her new brief as Levelling Up Secretary, Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, and she's talking about homes at the moment. So the idea, and this is going to be, I think this is going to be a conference absolutely chock-a-block with policy, and they're gradually going to start leaking them out over the next couple of days. So this one is that the Tories had a target, 300,000 new homes. They haven't met the target. Labour are saying that'll be their benchmark. That's the target that they are heading for.
And how are they going to fund it?
Well, it's not so much funding it; it's actually getting through the through the problems of planning and also developers. So you have a situation where developers are land banking, getting hold of land, hanging on to it, waiting for prices to go up. So the issue really is to get the developers to actually develop the properties they're meant to. Also, ease planning rules so it all happens much quicker. The detail of that, one would hope, will actually be explained at the Labour conference.
Aren't they looking at what they're calling the Golden Triangle between Oxford, Cambridge and London?
I think they're looking really across the country.
Oh, there you go. Well, I heard... It's only because I live near Oxford that I was thinking...
Right.
Oxford, Cambridge, London. There's an awful lot of green belt there.
Yeah.
And there's going to be an awful lot of people who say, oh, yes, we need affordable homes, but not there.
And I wonder, Claire, if this is part... Look, the Labour Party have never got over the fact that Thatcher sold off council houses, have they? They've been banging on about that for decades. Is this, do you think, a sort of reinvention of Labour as the party of social housing? Sounds great on paper. It sounds great on paper, scrapping planning rules. Sounds great on paper, taxing the property developers. But can any of this actually happen?
Well, I mean, that's where the detail needs to come in, because having sat on a local authority for 8 years, planning is the most contentious issue that you will ever have to deal with. And yes, people do want affordable homes, they want more houses, but nowhere near them. And this is your problem, is that you try and relax planning rules, local communities will go up against you. So I'm not sure how they're going to square that off and what kind of properties they're going to build. And the areas that they're looking at building in are beautiful green spaces. There may well be areas of outstanding natural beauty nearby, and you cannot just ride roughshod over these kind of rules. So I think it's really interesting that Labour have brought up housing, because the Conservatives in the week past didn't mention it, which I think is a real mistake. It's one of these issues which younger people will absolutely want to hear more detail on, and it really is a vote winner in that respect.
And it's a proper grassroots Labour.
Yes, it is. I mean, one of the things, the worries about the green belt, one of the things that will have to happen is how you designate green belt. So Keir Starmer discovered that there was a car park in Maidstone which was designated green belt, but while the school playing fields nearby weren't. So, in other words, you couldn't build on the car park, but you could build on the playing fields. So it's a matter of actually sorting out the rules.
But the fascinating thing about this is that people want to live where the work is. They want to live in cities. They don't want to live on brownfield sites. They don't want to live in the middle of nowhere. This idea of new towns keeps coming up, and they're putting this front and centre. New towns, very, very ambitious, but without the jobs. without the infrastructure, it's pie in the sky.
He's also talked about building them near railway lines, hasn't he?
Yes, all these things.
I mean, this is interesting if he comes up with some detail that makes
Yes, I mean, the key thing is that what we've lacked from Labour all the way through is we don't get the detail. We get a rough idea of what policy is going to be, but we don't get the detail about how they're going to carry it out.
Yeah.
This being the last conference before the next election, likely to be the last conference before the next election, what he's got to do is actually tell us how he's going to do things. It's not good enough to say, oh, my ambition is to do this, this and this.
What's your gut feeling? Do you think he will?
Yes, I do. Yeah, because I think that
Now's the time.
Now is the time. He's been... he was gradually changing the Labour Party. He was setting up new ideas. Now he's got to explain in detail how they'll be carried out.
The era of fence-sitting has to end. Pat McFadden told us yesterday,
Yes, he did.
Expect a policy-rich conference. Stop flashing your garter. How are you going to make us jump into bed with you, so to speak, Keir Starmer? Because it's like we need to see some firm details.
And interestingly, it was Alistair Campbell and people like that, Mandelson and others were saying, now is the time to come out with real policies, even if it means you will be attacked for them.
Yes, I mean, the point that they were making, and there was a very good piece that The Guardian did yesterday about this, the point that these are all the characters who were around in 1996, and if you like, this year is the repeat of 1996 before the landslide in 1997.
Well,
Do you think
is it?
Oh, I do think, well, at the moment, it looks like a landslide, yes. So what they were saying was that Starmer is actually proving himself to be competent. Now the trick is to also prove he is radical, which, of course, Tony Blair was.
Final word on this, Claire, before we move on to the much more important topic of the menopause. Does all this kind of sabre-rattling by the likes of Campbell and Mandelson actually start to make people think, well, no, is Blair just another Tony... Is Starmer a Tony Blair puppet?
And I think that's the problem. The Tony Blair Institute is there in the background. It is working really hard. And when you have the names of Mandelson and Campbell coming back into the mix, I think some people are going to be worried about it.
And David Miliband as well. He was speaking yesterday.
And I think this is your problem, because people wanted a Labour Party that was different. They wanted something new. And it is now incumbent upon the Labour Party to put out there these policy ideas properly fleshed out, because suddenly being we're not the Conservative Party isn't going to be enough to get them past the post.
Absolutely.
Right.
So it's going to be an interesting conference.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's going to be, and we need to see some detail. Long may it continue. Right, I've been banging about...
No, hang on. Let's do the headlines first,
Yes.
and then we can give the menopause the sort of breathing time that it needs. Yeah. It is just coming up to 6:45. A reminder of our top stories this morning.
And after the Labour Party heralded yesterday's success in the by-election in Scotland as seismic, today we're asking, is Scottish independence facing its own earthquake? We'll be debating that in this next hour.
And then, of course, have you noticed that it has turned much warmer recently? Apparently, we are experiencing an unusual blast of warm October weather. How long will it last? We'll give you all the details.
And coming up, we'll look back on Suella Braverman's controversial speech on immigration during the Conservative Party conference this week in Manchester.
So back to our headline makers, Nigel and Claire. And Claire, tell us about the front page, I think it is, of the Daily Mail.
Yep.
And it's all about menopause madness.
Which is absolute madness, I have to say. This is dozens of councils, university, police forces and fire services have designated that there can be a male menopause, and therefore male employees will be given flexible working rights. They can be allowed 12 months off on full pay because they experience symptoms of the menopause. Now, I have quite a big issue with this. I think this is absolutely ridiculous.
I think your curled lip and voice like a cheese grater gave it away. Yeah, go on.
Do you think so? I feel quite strongly about this.
Yeah.
This is not something that men will suffer from. Men might suffer from a midlife crisis. They might go and buy a sports car or a leather jacket, go and do something dangerous for fun, but they don't suffer the kind of physical symptoms that women will do. And I'm getting the look from that end of the table. I can feel it here. And I will put it out there that this is something women suffer. This is a woman's condition.
Yes.
And we have fought long and hard to have it recognised. We have fought long and hard to get the right treatments for it, which are still not coming through. There are HRT shortages across the country. The government cannot get this right. And then suddenly we're going to introduce men who might just feel a little bit upset when they're...
Can I just ask you, because obviously you've read right through that piece and talked about it before, is the word menopause something that the Daily Mail and other headline writers are coming up with?
Cool.
Or are these particular institutions recognising that word, menopause?
They're not necessarily recognising the word. I do think this is something that has been created for us, but they're not backing down on it either. So what you find is that the Daily Mail will come up with menopause and these institutions will take it over. They're calling it the male menopause, which isn't a thing.
But it isn't a thing, no.
It isn't,
Well,
and this is why I...
You have to menstruate and then stop menstruating, and that's what causes many of the problems for women.
Happens.
Men don't do that.
Exactly.
Right, so...
They might have problems.
The case for men, Nigel, I totally agree. I think the word menopause is ridiculous. It debases the issue and it tries to infer that men have a place in women's health, which is, I think, unfair. But, Nigel, men do go through certain changes and they do have certain issues, and I think this sort of stuff undermines all that.
And the point is bringing some common sense into this whole thing. Male menopause is the wrong description for it.
Yes.
And it's absolutely right that sort of demeans women. And I can understand why Claire is so angry about this. You should have seen her in the car on the way up. But the whole thing is that if you check... The answer is check the NHS website, because they have a really good explanation for this, but after the age of about 30 to 40, men's testosterone levels begin to go down about 1% a year. And that can cause a number of symptoms, depression, it can cause hot flushes, it can cause anxiety, it can cause lack of libido,
love handles,
mood swings,
love handles, moobs.
Yeah, and all those things, yes. So there is a change in men. It doesn't affect all men. Something like a quarter at the most, 1 in 10 probably. But there are these changes. The issue there is not to actually say this is a menopause. It also is not an instant thing. It goes on for many years. But if you have those symptoms, it is quite right that an employer should have policies in place to actually treat them. So, like if you were suffering depression normally, that the employer would try and help you out, deal with that. So it's the headline that's wrong here.
Yes.
Don't call it male menopause. I mean, the best description is age-related low testosterone, but it is sort of.
But what upsets me is whether these institutions are calling it male menopause, because they shouldn't be, should they?
I don't think they are.
But I think they are, and this is the point. They do have guidance internally that states that these are male menopause symptoms. And all of the symptoms that you've described there and the 1% drop in testosterone is not enough to make a material difference to a man. It isn't enough. Women go through such violent changes, realistically, with their hormone levels.
It does make a material difference to some men. That's the whole point.
But scientists themselves say that the drop-off of this 1% isn't enough to actually make it into a condition. It is something that naturally happens, and men can still father children into their 70s and 80s, whereas women have that cut-off point. So it isn't the same. This is a lengthy process, which I think is just known as ageing.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, age really gets you in the end, doesn't it? No matter what gender you might be.
I'd like to see them go further and legally and medically recognise man flu. But anyway, that's just...
Oh, yes, that's just you. Yeah. Let's move on to something that is really causing a stir at the moment, and that's bed bugs.
Yeah. Panic is said to be sweeping Paris and other French cities as infestations, what a horrible word, of bed bugs have soared in recent weeks, and there are fears that the UK could be the next target.
And it is quite frightening when you think about it. Let's bring in Robert Fryers, who's found